Hello and welcome to the Mullet Over podcast. My co-host isn't here today, so you're not going to get the music, montage at the beginning. You're not going to get some of that, but we are excited today. Our special guest, Chris Gleason, and we actually are just kind of meeting for the first time online as we're introducing you to our world and our guests, and as our audience. So you've got some really powerful and important stuff to share, and I'd love for you, rather than me introduce you because I have limited amount of knowledge, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, and just tell us, take your time. Tell us, who is Chris Gleason?
Sure. So my name's Chris Gleason. I'm a serial entrepreneur, tech and finance guy. I've been working in finance and technology pretty much for a large part of my adult career. Going back to before most banks had websites, I had invented a search engine for mortgage loan programs and process streamlining. And basically what we did is we created a mortgage loan search engine and processing program that would take your mortgage loan down to about 3 mouse clicks.
Wow.
From import from a website to figuring out whether or not the loan could get approved, and then submitting it out to banks after pulling credit and all sorts of stuff. That was back in like 97 that we came up with the idea and started working on it. And since then, been involved with a bunch of pretty cool things. Back in 2014, after my first time being deplatformed on social media, I was able to rope in some friends. And
what year was that?
What's that? 2014?
Wow, I didn't know they were doing platforming people that long ago.
Yeah. At the time, I had as a kind of like a side thing that I had done, I had invented some really cool rifle magazines for special operations rifles for the FN SCAR. And I built up a pretty large presence on social media. And we had a very, very popular company page. And we were social media influencers before there were social media influencers. And we did some really cool stuff, especially as Obama and company were looking to ban guns, especially after Newtown. And we made some really good memes that were very, very popular. And we did a lot of good work. Too good, apparently. And we drew the ire of the anti-gun crowd. And so they would mass report our page and get us shut down. And on Columbus Day 2014, apparently I crossed the boundary, and the anti-gun left went nuts. And it was kind of funny. So they ended up deleting our page, deleting my company page. And a friend of mine, he owned a very, very popular forum, and it was like AR15.com, a guy by the name of Ben. And he was like, hey, I can hook you up with this guy, Chuck, at Facebook, and he might be able to help you out. So he hooked me up with Chuck and reached out to him, and I said, here's, I don't think we broke any rules. I don't think we broke any of your guidelines, your community standards. We've always been pretty, pretty careful about that stuff. But the big problem is, when you don't give us any guidance as to what's violating rules and terms.
I just got a warning today. Funny that we even like jump in at this point, because I got a warning today and I'm like, what I did use the C word.
Yeah.
But it was a story of my own sister who was completely healed.
Yeah.
And had the whole protocol, the death protocol. And so I'm like, what was it like? And it may have been something else. I have no idea, but I'm
probably
like
not.
2 warnings.
Yeah, probably not. So we'll get into that. That's really a big part of what we see here. So, Chuck, he said, no promises, but I'll take a look at what you have, and we'll see what, if I can do anything. And I'm like, okay, well, I appreciate that. So that was October, Columbus Day, or a couple of days after Columbus Day. And about a couple of days before Christmas, he reaches out to me and he's like, hey, we looked at your stuff, and, clearly you didn't really violate any of the terms of the conditions. Certainly not to warrant, us deleting your page. There were 3 posts, over, the couple of years that we had been on Facebook that were, right to the line, but we didn't cross it. But they were right to the line. And he's like, I know what's going on. I understand the problem, and we'll get this resolved. And I'm like, okay, great, thanks. And he mentioned me. He's like, oh, I might be at SHOT Show. I'm going to be at SHOT Show in January. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I go, well, let's exchange information, and I'd like to meet you and thank you. And he's like, yeah, okay, great. So go to SHOT Show. On the way there, I caught a ban, a personal ban for posting stuff. And it was interesting because it really wasn't. It was a cartoon. It was a political cartoon.
Wow.
And cartoons are supposed to be kind of exempt from stuff.
Wow.
And it was a cartoon being critical of European immigration that was going on at the time from Africa and the Middle East. And so, I'm literally, getting ready to go, like I'm at the airport, getting ready to get on a plane to go meet this guy, the next day. And boom, I get, that profile get hit and, couldn't do anything. So get to SHOT Show, and we end up connecting by text message, and we start talking. And what was interesting was that he didn't know, Chuck didn't know that I was a tech guy. And so I was like, hey, look it, I don't understand what's going on over there at Facebook, because I didn't post anything that violated any of your terms of service yesterday, but I got banned. I got a ban. I got a 30-day ban here. And I go, how do I shift my fire if I don't know what I'm doing wrong? I go, at the end of the day, having all of my traffic from Facebook, go to 0 overnight, that's a big problem for me as a business owner. I had people work for me, and we had put a lot of eggs in the Facebook basket because that's where the eyeballs were, And so Chuck explained to me that a lot of that was done, a lot of everything on how bans worked. He's like, we got 3 billion posts that we deal with every 15 minutes. He's like, wow. So there's no, this was at 2014, right? Um, he's like, there's no way that, this is all done through automated processes and bots and da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, well, I understand that, Chuck. I go, but here's the thing. I wasn't always a gun guy. Well, I've always been a gun guy, but I wasn't always working in the gun industry. I go, I actually invented a search engine for mortgage loan programs before most banks had websites. I go, and he's like, I'm like, so can we, let's talk. I go, I'm just trying not to, get my business shut down. And, I need to know what I need to do to not get taken out. And I go, because we know that software code doesn't write itself. This was in 14 at the time when software code didn't write itself. Mm-hmm. However, inherent biases in AI or in bots or in the code itself, it's apparent. And clearly, that was what was going on in our case. And so as he and I were talking about, we were kind of going back and forth with it. He's like, look at, he's like, things are very uncomfortable here at Facebook right now. This was in 14.
Wow.
He was saying how, a lot of the libertarians, that worked there, it was becoming a very uncomfortable place for them to work. And he's like, myself, he's like, I'm a gun guy. He's like, I'm a libertarian, he's like, it's a little challenging. And so we started talking about that. And he's like, I'm not a bad guy. He's like, I used to work at Google, and I left Google because they were doing some really bad stuff. And I came here, and things were good for a while. He's like, but they're not, not so much, they're getting worse here. And he's like, so as we were kind of flushing that out, I said to him, okay, so we had a conversation, and I'm like, what do we have to do, Chuck? What do I have to do as a business owner? He's like, you got to stay away from the Muslim immigration stuff here, or any immigration right now. You got to stay away from it. And this comes right from the top. He's like, if I can't help you, it means that it comes right from Zuckerberg's office.
Wow.
And so we started kind of flushing that out. And he explained to me how Sheryl Sandberg, the COO at the time, was wielding a great amount of influence on things at Facebook. And so as we're talking about that, he's explaining to me how Sheryl Sandberg was a Clinton staffer. She worked for Larry Summers. And so I'm like, okay, so I've got to stay away from the Muslim immigration and the Clintons. Okay, all right. I think I stay away from your immigration here, and the Clintons. All right, I think I can deal with that. And so as we're sitting there talking, I'm like, now with Facebook's rules and community standards, I don't violate any of them. And at the time, I had made a conscious decision not to sell firearms because I didn't want to run afoul of Facebook's community standards or rules.
I sold a decorative sword and ended up in marketplace hell for that. So
yeah. So
and it's something that according to their standards you're allowed to.
Yeah.
But it was like, and there's no appeal process.
Nope.
Once you are banned, you are banned. It kind of says you are there forever.
Yeah.
And I tried to find out, is there any appeal process there? And there isn't. It didn't exist.
Yeah. Very
Crazy.
obtuse. Very obtuse. So our thing was we manufactured accessories. We manufactured accessories that didn't break. And, we made memes and we sold T-shirts and, that's what we did. And we were very effective, and people liked the content that we were creating at the time, and it was working well for us. So what was interesting, I said, so Chuck, well, he's like, when I started really pushing the issue on the accessories, he's like, look, it's not going to happen. It's absolutely not going to happen. I'm like, well, what are you doing here? I go, Facebook doesn't want all of this stuff here. This is the largest trade show that comes into Vegas. There's a lot of advertising dollars here. And he's like, not going to happen. I'm like, so what are you doing here? He's like, oh, I'm here working the FBI NCIS booth. And I was like, really? He's like, yep. And in our conversation, he's telling me about how, the government was putting some pressure on them, and there was a lot of things. He was telling me about a time that he was in a meeting he was telling me he was in a meeting in the White House talking to Obama because he was part of the team that Obama brought in to rebuild healthcare.gov after Michael Obama's college roommate built the United States out of $100-something million to build a non-functioning website that crashed. So, Chuck was part of that team, and they rebuilt healthcare.gov with about $15 million. And so here you got a guy who's the director of engineering at Facebook that reviews every single line of code that gets rolled out onto the Facebook servers at the SHOT Show, working the FBI NCIS booth, who also built healthcare.gov. Interesting.
Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here. Now, this is in 2014, right?
Wow.
So, Chuck said, he was like, as we were talking, I'm like, is there anything I can do for you? What can because I'm really, at that point, I was just really grateful, that he had gotten me back on. He's like, well, if you could put in a good word for us in the groups, in the gun groups or in the gun community, that would be really great. I'm like, absolutely. I will, I'll definitely talk about you and send people your way. And so that began our multi-year arrangement. So the arrangement was, my stuff was hard coded to not be taken down, because Chuck coded my page not to get taken down, and I would help him by putting in a good words, and helping other people who had been erroneously deplatformed to get back on. So I'd make the introduction. I would do that, and he, so we from 14. From 14 to about 18, I worked with Chuck to get a lot of conservatives who had their pages mass reported and their profiles taken down. At the time, as all that stuff was going on, we kind of knew that the writing was on the wall, and it was just a matter of time before they deplatformed us. And so we had been working on other ways to monetize our content and do some backup stuff. And so probably about 15, in January 15, my brother-in-law, he was a DARPA software developer, and he was helping me do an integration with some of the stuff that I was doing. And he's like, wow, He's like, you really do nothing. He's like, you're not doing anything wrong, and they're like hitting you guys. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what's going on. He's like, that's not right. And I'm like, nope. He's like, we should do something. We should build something. I'm like, yeah, we should. So we started conceptualizing a platform, and we ended up starting the coding for that. We started writing code probably about the end of 16 into 17. We started writing code to build our own censorship-free platform. This was before Parler or really anybody, And so it was pretty interesting. So about 3 weeks before the midterm elections in 2018, I ended up getting hit again. It was kind of interesting because Facebook, after 16, there was a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth when Trump won, and they vowed that was not going to happen again. And as a matter of fact, we were very effective in not being deplatformed in 16. We were so effective that on the day of the election, the Washington Post did a hit piece on my company. And they talked about how Trump's supporters were obsessed with a 300 BC battle between the Spartans and the Persians. And they called us a bunch of ultra-nationalist, neo-Nazi, xenophobe racists. And this is like, just absolutely over the top, at the time. So that was very telling. So in 18, when the left lost, they got together and they planned to take back the House in 18. And as part of that, Facebook had rolled out a verification program where if you were going to run ads or things like that, you had to be verified, certified, and they wanted identity verification, the whole 9 yards. And so we ran I was running a lot of ads at the time on Facebook. For our t-shirts and our apparel, and that was a pretty decent, lucrative business for us. And so, but because we would do these t-shirts based off of, hot social topics and memes, we fell into that political category, and we had to get approval. So I jumped through all the hoops. They ended up making me provide them with my social security number, my driver's license, and my passport.
Wow.
So, and then what they did was they sent a postcard to my P.O. box. So I had to, they gave me 24 hours. They said you had from receipt of the postcard to entering in this code to validate that you were, where you said you were. So everything was run out of, the correspondence and all that was run out of a post office box. So I did that, and then, like I said, 3 weeks prior to the midterms, I just gotten in the office, and I was getting ready to make a morning post, and my phone rang, and it was a friend of mine from Colorado, and I had helped her get back on after Facebook had taken her out. And she's like, hey, I lost my page. My page is gone. They took it down. And she's like, but they also hit my profile. Because usually what they would do is when they hit you, they'd hit your page, but they wouldn't delete your profile. And they hit her page, took it down, and they her profile was gone. So I'm like, that's odd. I'm like, well, let me check mine. And then I went to go and I hit a button and I got kicked out of Facebook. And then I went to sign in and nothing. So I'm like, well, they just got me too. So let me reach out to Chuck and I'll let you know what's going on. This isn't supposed to happen. She's like, yeah, I know. So then my phone starts ringing and it's now ringing off the hook. Everybody who I had helped get back onto Facebook, we're all getting purged. And this is 3 weeks in the lead up to the election. And I'm like, so I reached out to Chuck at Facebook, and so then our pages, because we had a lot of pages would go back up, and then about a minute or a couple minutes later, boom, the pages would go back down. And then it would go back up, and it would go back down. And so I called Chuck. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, give me some time to figure this out, and I'll get back to you. Well, a little while later, he reaches out to me, and he's like, this appears to be what's going on. And he sent me a link from the Facebook newsroom that Facebook had just purged a large number of Russian bots, clickbait farms, bad actors who were looking to influence the election results going into the midterms. And I'm like, Chuck, I go, you know who I am. You know that I'm not a Russian bot. I don't violate the rules and standards. And I'm certainly not trying to alter the elections. If anybody's trying to alter the elections, it's Facebook. And you told me that, blah, blah, blah. I did what I was, I kept up my end of the bargain here. And, I have not violated anything. He's like, try to appeal it and let me see what I can do. So he ends up, I ended up rehashing some of our earlier conversations in an email chain, and I sent it off to him. And he told me, he's like, look, there's nothing that I can do at this point for you. And I was like, okay, so that means it came directly from Zuck. And the other thing that he said was, you need to get press and friendly politicians involved with this. You need to get the word out on this. So I did. And that was kind of how I got into the politics side of data and censorship and how it relates to influencing elections and election and election integrity.
Did you happen to know a praying medic?
Yeah. I know Dave.
Yeah. Okay. He was deplatformed, and
I
was on his show back in the day, and yeah.
So when Dave was getting going, I was deplatformed everywhere at that point. And I did have I had a newly established Twitter account.
Yeah.
And at the behest of my wife, because of all the fire that we had taken, she's like, please don't wade out into this stuff publicly and just influence the influencers. She's like, that would make me happy. I'm like, all right. And I did. So I actually used to talk to Dave a bit.
Wow.
And when
so you got him in trouble. It's your fault.
No, not necessarily.
I'm kidding.
I actually tried to help. I tried to help them out quite a bit, actually. Yeah. So when he got taken out, he had set up on an alternative platform, and they got hit. We had already built up our stuff, and we were kind of off and running. And I was asked to help them with some of their missteps that they had made.
Yeah.
And
so that's how I actually heard about you. That's how we end up with you on the podcast. One of my talking points was election fraud here in Florida.
Yeah.
That you're kind of a big guy in that. And according to, like, you have what somebody tells you and your understanding of it, and then it gets clarified. I kind of thought that you were kind of a back end, almost like a hacker type.
Yeah.
And have you heard of Ryan Montgomery?
No.
He's considered the most ethical hacker. He was on the Sean Ryan show.
Okay.
That was when I even got introduced to Sean Ryan.
Yeah, I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
So,
this guy is pretty amazing. And a lot of stuff came to light. And we ended up buying a property that was going to be a home for victims of human trafficking. And the guy we bought from is a paid hacker by the government.
Yeah.
And he, as a teenager, got in trouble, federal prison stuff, you know, and now they pay him really well. But it blew me away what they're able to get. Like, he's paid to hack cars.
Yeah.
And paid to hack, you know, like government facilities because they want to discover the vulnerabilities and shut them down. But it blew my mind. And this guy on Sean Ryan's show, he was talking about all the things that they can hack and take control of, and made it sound easy.
Yeah, it is.
Blew my mind. Like, they could take complete control of a car, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, like, if you can imagine it,
all it is software code. All it is, it's very basic level. It's a 1 and a 0. It's an on state and an off state. You know what I mean? So it's a little switch.
Is that anything like what you're doing? But you have information about election fraud that is
pretty good stuff. Yeah. So how I got involved with this. So we built this platform, right? And we were like I said, we got taken out everywhere. And I was in the process of writing a white paper because we were building a crypto component into our platform. And I was on Reddit one day. It was on I think it was on a Friday, and Trump had just announced that he was gonna. They just announced they were doing the SPAC, the DWAC SPAC to raise capital. And on Friday, it came out that the development team had repurposed a Mastodon instance and claimed that that they had the whole thing was like 98% their own code. And so I ended up reaching out to Roger Stone. So I had talked to Roger back in, I think it was like first time I had talked to Roger was back in like 2017 about my censorship-free platform. And so I have a solution to the problem, and we have an immutable, secure communications platform that we could have white branded, white labeled, rolled out tomorrow, and True Social would be up and running, and they would be bulletproof. And for one reason or another, the deal didn't end up going through. But I started working with Roger, trying to help him on some of his censorship issues that he was dealing with. And so we were looking at the issues with email and SMS being censored. And so I was building we started building our own MailChimp alternative and SMS messaging alternative. And so it's all integrated with what we were building, this platform. And I ended up getting involved with a data project for Washington State with Roger, or helping Roger and a congressional candidate out there. And we went to solve a problem because in Washington State, the voter rolls, they don't delineate between Republicans and Democrats, and so the data is a little fuzzy, and it also doesn't tell you the difference with the non-party affiliated. So what we were looking to do was to identify who was a Republican, who was a Democrat, who were non-party affiliated, and come up with a methodology to determine how likely they were to vote in the primaries, how likely they were to donate money, and who they would be donating money for. So as we put together these algorithms and we were solving this data problem, one of the developers who worked for me, he got me the data. I'm looking at it and I'm like, what? I go, this can't be right. I'm like, this number here and this row, I mean, in this column, I'm like, it's telling me that these people here at the top of this list, they donated 3,000 times. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, this can't be right. And he's like, no, I'll check it. And I'm like, yeah, do me a favor, check it one more time for me. And he goes back and he checks it and he comes back and I'm like, he's like, no. And I'm like, okay. We had also started working on a data project in Oklahoma for Jackson Laymeyer. He was running for Senate. So we had some of that data and I'm like, run it for Oklahoma. Run this algorithm in the data for Oklahoma. And so while he's doing that, I started looking into Washington State and these people. And so did like a top 100 and did some profiling. And largely, they were mostly Democrat people. I'm like, this is crazy. So started looking into what are their homes worth? What kind of mortgages did they have? What kind of jobs did they have? And I'm like, this doesn't add up at all. And so by the time we put together that profile in Washington State, get the data back for Oklahoma. And I'm like, similar pattern. And I'm like, Now, in the lead up to the 2020 election, I had been doing some stuff, and I had caught some big tech censorship that they were playing around with emails, where they were routing all the conservatives and all the fundraising emails into the spam filters. Wow. And so I had talked to a couple of conservative candidates and said, hey, look it. There's things that we can control.
This would be like MailChimp?
MailChimp or any one of the other mail services. They would...
like Gmail.
So Gmail.
Oh, my goodness.
AOL, Yahoo, anything conservative related for fundraising emails were all getting routed into the spam filters on Google. I mean, it was so egregious. It was so crazy. So, I mean, I reached out to, when I saw what they were doing, I reached out to the RNC. I reached out to the CIO for the RNC. Like I said, I reached out to some candidates. I showed it to Laura Loomer, who was running at the time for Lois Lerner's seat, and also Anna Paulina Luna here in Pinellas County. And so as we're getting closer to the election, to November, I'm like, this is not good. And you have to understand, Facebook and what they really do and what they really are about. Same thing with Google, okay? Facebook and Google are not necessarily who you think they are and what you think that they do. Deep ties to .intel, .gov, DARPA, intelligence agencies.
What you're saying is so... We deal with, from a different angle. We're ministering to hurting and broken people.
Yeah.
People that have been human trafficked. And from that vantage point, what we uncover and discover without trying to, we're not looking for it. We're trying to help broken people.
Yeah.
And almost every one of them has been impacted by governmental, by one of the agencies, by and then you peel it back a little bit later. I'm going, at first I was like going, I'm working with the elite group of people. The people that care for these people are the elite, like sold out, caring people. No. So many of them are tied in. They're traffickers that are supposedly fighting human trafficking.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so what you think you're dealing with is a wolf in it's truly a wolf in sheep's clothing. It looks like a sheep, but you can see the snout, you can see the teeth.
Yeah.
But most people are fooled. They don't recognize that, they don't think to look beyond the facade.
Yeah.
So you're like, not, this is firsthand information. That's the hard thing. Like the stuff that I talk about, we've gotten to see and touch and feel.
Yeah.
Now some of it I can't talk about because I'm not an investigator. That's not my job, but I know what I know, you know? And so I want it exposed. I'm praying for it to be exposed. But you're talking about, you can see the code, you can read the code, you can see what's happening.
Yeah.
And firsthand.
And you can understand, you see the trends, you see the data. So, I saw the censorship because I had the analytics going into 2018 and understanding Facebook and who they are and what they do. I don't know if you know who Jason Fick is. Do you know Jason?
No.
Jason, at one point, he had the largest presence on Facebook that there was.
Wow.
He had a pile of pages. I think he must have like 25 to 30 million fans and followers across Facebook. And this is like going back, 2012, 2013, 2014, right? So when I got deplatformed the second time, I had already met Jason, and he and I had a long conversation about stuff, and he was like, "Hey, I need you to be a part of my lawsuit with me because of how in deep you are with all of this." And I said, Jason, if we go about this the way I want to, that's the only way that this is going to work. I go, because this really is a First Amendment issue, but nobody wants to really talk about that. Nobody really wants to do anything about that because at the time there was no attorneys, none, zero. When I explained to them what was going on in the relationship between Facebook and .intel, nobody would. They're like, "I'm not suing the CIA," and I'm like, and so Jason, he ended up, Facebook has played this game with, Section 230 immunity from prosecution, and the rest of big tech have just absolutely done horrific things with this. Okay, that would be your human trafficking, right? That would be all of the horrible stuff. The people who were murdered on Facebook Live, in the Middle East with ISIS, and just terrible, awful stuff. And I knew based on certain relationships that I had, and that was not going to be the way to skin the cat. So I came up in the fall of 2020 with another way. I was going to go after Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg and Jack Dorsey over undisclosed in-kind campaign contributions because of the monetary value of deplatforming and censorship. And so that was kind of how I really got into the election stuff. And so as this was going on, I ended up hiring a law firm to represent me in filing a complaint, an FEC complaint against Facebook and Twitter and Google over the illegal in-kind campaign contributions. This is in 2020, October of 2020. And this was before the Hunter Biden laptop thing. And the attorney, the law firm that I retained, they ended up representing the RNC using this legal strategy that I shared with them over the Hunter Biden laptop. Okay? And Anna Paulina Luna, she started the process of filing a complaint with the FEC, with Twitter about it. And I had tried to do some stuff here in Florida after the election and since. And so as with the contacts that I had in the Secretary of State's office here in Florida, I had explained to them that if they wanted to really do something about the Facebook problem, and that was when Laura Lee was the Secretary of State at the time, and DeSantis had said that they were looking to do something with this Facebook whitelist. And so I called up Laura Lee's office and I said, hey, I've got some non-public information regarding this, and you really need to hear what I have, and I have it all. It's all documentable. I got it all. So within 48 hours, I got a call from the general counsel's office and the state attorney's office, and it was a lady by the name of Colleen O'Brien. And I explained to her, I'm like, what you think that you're dealing with is a lot bigger and a lot different than what you understand. And if you are going to really try to go after Facebook on this, you have to know what you're dealing with. So I explained it to her. I explained to her how about the PayPal mafia, okay, about Peter Thiel, about Palantir, and how Facebook was essentially a rebranded creation of the DARPA LifeLog project in order to feed data into Palantir so that they could mine it and then pass it along to the .intel, because Facebook had some the ability, and Palantir had the ability to do relationship graph mapping, which was very helpful for them to map out terrorist networks overseas, right? So as I was kind of, running her through all of this, I'm like, I know for a fact that you're not going to get anywhere if you're going to take on Facebook like this. You're going to have to do it a different way. And here's the way to do it. The boosting of posts is something that's Facebook's business. They're in the business of boosting posts. That's what you pay them for. And so there's a clear monetary value to that. And Facebook didn't disclose those in-kind campaign contributions, okay, for Democrats and Democratic candidates. So then I said to her, I'm like, so let me ask you a question. If Coca-Cola and Facebook worked out a deal where Facebook was going to deplatform Pepsi-Cola and then censor all of Pepsi-Cola's influencers and evangelists and deplatform them, what would be the value to Coca-Cola? What would be that monetary value? It's priceless. It's absolutely priceless. And there's significant value to that. And when you look at the effect on that, and when you look at the national elections, right, with the censorship, with all of this stuff, you're talking the worth on this is like trillions of dollars. Now, Florida had some pretty cool laws for campaign finance where they could actually go after Mark Zuckerberg. So I said, this is the way you get him. You do this here in Florida. I go, Mark Zuckerberg, he's going to have a hard time being the CEO of a publicly traded company when you've nailed him you've nailed him on quite a few campaign finance violations that are felonies here in Florida. And so I had a contact with that, and like I said, that was my the building of my relationship with the Secretary of State's office. So as we go back now to the run up to the 2022 November election, right? I found this stuff. We found this stuff in Washington State. We proved it there. We validated it in Oklahoma. And so I reached out to the people that I knew at the Secretary of State's office, and I said, hey, we found some crazy stuff in the data, and I want to see if it's going on here in Florida too. And can you send me a copy of the entire state campaign finance database from 2015 to present day? And she's like, yeah, sure, we can do that. So they ended up sending me that and started looking into it. And I was in it, 5 minutes, and I found some really disturbing stuff. We were able to quickly target how Soros and all of these various nefarious PACs were buying local elections, and how they were basically doing the same thing, not only at the federal level, but now also at the state level in the local elections. And so when I saw that, I went to a friend of mine who's a retired FBI agent, and I said, hey, this is what I found. What should I do with this? He's like, let me hook you up with my friends in election integrity. And so we ended up getting hooked up with this guy who's an attorney who had started a nonprofit that was based on election integrity. And they ended up asking me to be on their board of advisors, and I agreed. And then I started getting involved, or started meeting other people in other groups across the state, and we started looking at stuff. We were looking at the voter rolls because the voter rolls were a big problem. And when I created my platform, my social platform and content monetization platform, we had to do a fair amount of identity verification to ensure that we were paying people who just didn't create a profile out of anywhere and were uploading content. We needed to make sure that the people were the people, right? And so as we're kind of working through all of this, I'm seeing the rolls, and I'm like, this is insane. This is absolutely insane here in Florida. So I ended up going to Secretary of State's office, and I'm like, look, we found so much crazy stuff here that you need to tell DeSantis that he has got to retain all the election data from the 2020 election, because we need to do a full audit on this, because the stuff that we're finding is insane, and we need to stop this. Otherwise, we're never going to have another real election again. And I go, if DeSantis does this, if the governor does this, he'll be a rock star and the savior of America if he does this. And this is before Court Byrd even was appointed. And so it's about a month before Court Byrd was appointed. So I'm talking with the general counsel about this, and he's like, thank you for all of this information. You've given me a lot to think about, a lot to talk about. I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So I got back into the data, still doing my thing. And then following week, I followed up with them. And I'm like, we got way more stuff here. And this is deeply, deeply problematic, and something has to happen. So I look forward to you getting back to me and letting me know. Nothing. Didn't hear anything from him. Week goes by. Never calls, never reaches out to me. So I reached back out to him. And that was when I started to get a good understanding that not only were the people who are supposed to be about election integrity and supposed to be safeguarding our elections really weren't. They had no interest in it. And, oh, by the way, they've also been the beneficiary of some election fraud themselves. So as we tried holding people accountable, we tried holding Maria Matthews, the director of elections, we tried to hold her accountable over them allowing non-citizens to register to vote at the DMV. They wanted nothing to do with that. And so as this is all spinning up, right, the primaries are kicking off. And a friend of mine who knew I was doing some stuff in election integrity, he's like, hey, one of my tenants who lives here, he's been living here for a couple of years now, he told me that he got like 3 or 4 ballots at his house. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, he got like 3 or 4 ballots. Like, have him save the envelopes for me. And so they saved the envelopes for me. And this guy was living in Pinellas County now. And got the ballots. And I walked into the supervisor of elections office. And I said, hey, I have a question for you. The state law says that all of the envelopes must say or shall say, do not forward on the envelopes. The envelopes here in Pinellas County don't say that. That's a problem because they're going to get forwarded. And he's like, no, that's not how it works. I'm like, well, actually it does, but okay. Can I speak to somebody about this? And they're like, yeah, let me get the deputy person here. And that was a guy by the name of Dustin Chase here in Pinellas County. So I started saying, hey, the envelopes that you guys are sending out, they don't say do not forward, and they're being forwarded. And this is a big problem, especially with the voter rolls the way that they are. He's like, oh, no. They don't get forwarded. I whip it out. I'm like, what is this? And he looks at me. And I'm like, the envelope is supposed to say do not forward. They are being forwarded. Here's one of them right now. And then he got real defensive and he was like, we're not changing anything. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, we already have all the envelopes printed. We're not changing anything. Nothing's going to change. I'm like, so wait a minute. You're telling me right now, you, the deputy supervisor of elections here in Pinellas County, you're telling me that you're not going to follow Florida election law statutes? He's like, where is it? He's like, that's not even, I'm like, no, it's right here. And so I pulled up the statute on my phone, much to his chagrin, and he wouldn't look at it. He's like, no. And he yells for one of his minions to bring out his election book. And he's sitting there looking through it, and he's looking down. And then he frowns, looks up at me. We're not changing anything. And nothing's going to happen. And I'm like, all right, can I have your card? So I got his card, went home, summed it all up, summed up the recap of our conversation where he's basically telling me he's not going to follow the election law. And so I copied the sheriff from the county on it, copied a bunch of people on election integrity on it, and nothing. Sheriff wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. However, some of the folks that I did copy it on, they said, hey, we're going to set up a meeting with the chair and the vice chair.
Can you hear that sound? Is that sound coming through?
What's that?
We're having a huge downpour right now. It is loud Can you
Okay.
hear it?
I can't.
You're
I
not
can't.
hearing it? Okay.
Nope.
Yeah. I got my headphones on, but wow, we're having an intense storm. It's Florida, so yeah.
Yeah. Just like election fraud, Florida.
Yeah. I can't hear you as well. It's that loud. I'm like going, wow. So
Ultimately, we got in to have a meeting with the chairperson and the vice chair at the Pinellas County Rec. It was Todd Jennings and Adam Ross. And I showed them what I found with the lists, with the vote by mail, with how dirty the voter rolls were, how we had, thousands and thousands of people with undeliverable addresses. And I started explaining to them about the stuff that we found with the campaign finance. And what was explained to me by Adam Ross, who is now the chair of the Pinellas County Republican Executive Committee, that all elections had cheating in them from the very beginning of time, and there was nothing that I was going to be able to do to stop it. And I just looked at him. I'm like, okay, well, that's certainly one way to look at it. However, there's a flaw in your thinking here. I go, the flaw in your thinking is that we have this neat thing. It's called technology. And the computing power that we have available to us today is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And I'm really good at what I do. And my people are really good at what they do. And what would have cost $100 million, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, now, we can do with $10,000 or less. And so you can either get with the program and help us out and clean this stuff up, or you could stand in the rubble of us burning all of this down. And the look on his face was like, And that's kind of where we're at today, burning it all down, because what we've found is not only was this individual, Adam Ross, he, interestingly enough, he's the executive director for the state attorney's office in Pinellas County. Mm. So the executive director for the state attorney's office, who, by the way, has a duty to act if he knows about criminality, is telling me there's nothing I can do about it because of the criminality. So if they're doing that with elections, right? They're probably doing it with child sex trafficking and human sex trafficking, because it's a big business, right?
Yep. It's one of the biggest.
Yeah. So we were watching races. We saw Laura Loomer's race get taken. We tried to warn her ahead of time. And after she lost, it was an eye-opening for her. And she is now, I've done a lot of work with Laura since. And like I said, we exposed the depth of DeSantis and Court Byrd and how they've been rigging elections here.
DeSantis has been involved in the rigging of the elections.
Yeah. And his Secretary of State, Court Byrd, Ashley Moody, the Chief Inspector General for the state of Florida. And I mean, the swamp is pretty deep. And, what we see. So as all of this is playing out, right, as we're uncovering these multiple pieces, as we're peeling the onion on this, and we're doing the right thing. We're going to the Secretary of State's office. We're informing them. We're putting pressure on them, trying to get them to do stuff, right? All on deaf ears. And it's like, okay, well, this is interesting.
A lot of the names you mentioned are people that are running on the platform of fighting these things.
Yeah. And so it's kind of interesting, right? So we did a study on the voter roll, and we came up with massive numbers of undeliverable mailing addresses that were on the voter rolls. And I put a great amount of pressure on DeSantis and on Rubio and on quite a few other people, saying, hey, if you guys don't do something about this, you guys are all going to lose. You're never going to win an election again. And so I ended up getting a phone call one afternoon from Cord Bird, and we had a long talk about the things that I had been finding. And he told me that I needed, he told me, at first he blamed it on me. And I'm like, wait a minute, how's this my fault? He's like, we're a month away from the election and you're coming to me with all of this stuff now. This is your fault. I'm like, no, actually, if you go and you check the emails in your office and your staff, you'll find out that I've been coming to you guys with stuff since about 2020. And long before you ever took office. So, you might be able to use that on some other people, but you can't use it on me. And then he's like, well, you need to run alternative candidates, in the primaries, and that's how you're going to win. I'm like, well, not when you're rigging the primaries, you're not. I go, look at Laura Loomer, look at Anthony Sabatini. And I go, I'm like, so. And he's like, well, then you need to sue. You need to sue us. You need to sue me. I'm like, wait a minute. You're telling me that I need to sue you to get you to do your job? I'm like, that kind of offends me, to be honest. I go, why can't you just do your job without me having to sue you? So it was an interesting conversation. And, the election crimes unit, they're not about election crimes.
So I want to ask a question. Is there hope?
Is there hope? Yes.
Turning this
around?
There is
hope. There is hope. But the hope lies in we the people. Okay? Because today they have captured the judiciary. They have captured the House and the Senate. Okay? And at the federal level and at the state level. Okay? So in the past 6 months, what we have seen is this new law called SB 7050. They rolled it out, and I call it the Florida Election Fraud Legalization Act, okay? Because it legalizes the theft of our elections, and it hides all the data that we use to catch them here in Florida, the data that we use to catch them in Maryland, the data that is being used to catch them in Georgia, and the data that was used to catch them in Arizona. And now, we find out that DeSantis's campaign is being financed by Dominion. the law, it's like you can't make this stuff up. So the highest court.
I'd love to get some, if there's a place to find that data and look at it. I'd love.
I will get some for you.
Awesome.
I will get some for you.
It is interesting because there are times right when the C word hit. Yeah. I really believed it was the Spirit of God telling me where to find stuff and research. Mm-hmm. And I could document things within the first week. I knew this was, man-made and et cetera, et cetera. I had people that had held me in high regard, thought I was an intelligent individual, would tell people, Richard Mull talks, listen, write me off and warn people about me. And I'm like, it wasn't even hard for me to document a lot of the things that I found.
Yeah.
And it is interesting because at some point I just got weary of feeling like It's very easy to find a lot of information and expose the truth or expose the lies to bring out the truth, but both. But most people don't want to do their own research. They go to the in fact, it was interesting. I would post just stuff about if you think you did research by going to a what do they call it? The police, the truth police. I'm drawing a blank. The what? Fact checkers. Yes. If you go to them and think you've researched, and people are going, well, where else do you go? And I was like, wow, you don't even realize that they've all been bought. Yeah. That it's all propaganda. And they weren't originally. Some of them were founded by people who had the right intention, wanted to expose stuff. But they were bought out.
Of course.
And taken over, and you got to do your own research. And so I don't often just buy it because I heard so and so. I'm going to go, do you document this? I want to look up the documentation. And there are things that you can find right there on government websites, like the World Economic Forum. That stuff is unbelievable. I mean, it's I can't believe what they post right there that they are going to do to the world.
Yeah.
Now, it's not easy to find that stuff. Often it's people that have found it that are exposing it that I trace the same loop, and I'm looking at the same data they are. Yeah. Because it's so massive that it takes people that are investigative and that are spending their time. And so
when you get hit, right, for censorship on the C word, okay, it's kind of the same thing with the election integrity stuff. Okay. Mm-hmm. There is a powerful organization. It's a nonprofit, quasi-governmental nonprofit. It's called the Center for Internet Security, okay? And they maintain the blacklist. All of the dangerous people, like me, I'm on it. And so when I go to do stuff, I show up on that list. And when we were getting ready to do this deal for Truth Social, right? I had a buddy of mine who worked at this company who they had their business is excess bandwidth to ensure that you don't get taken down and can handle the growth and the traffic. And this friend of mine worked there, and I told him I said, hey, look, I can't tell you who or what, but I'm going to need to be able to be bulletproof and handle, massive bandwidth growth here, like instantly, like flip a switch. We need to be bulletproof tomorrow. And I'm like, you guys, you mentioned before that you guys can do this. He's like, yeah. He's like, we're the company that does this. I'm like, cool. So he put me in touch with the director of sales, and we started.
Are you talking about Truth Social?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so as we were looking to, like I said, we were looking to take what I had and rebrand it for them to use, right? And what was really interesting is we were about, I think, 3 or 4 meetings deep into our deployment, mapping, the whole exercise of moving the stuff from some of our servers, setting things up there in different colo locations, just doing a bunch of different stuff. And I get a weird email. It was like, hey, Chris, what's your policy on hate speech and terrorism? I was like, oh, okay. All right. I know where this is going. So I wrote about a very well thought out email about my positions on it. I explained that I was a veteran. I explained to him how a friend of mine was killed in the September 11th terrorist attacks. how I lost close friends, overseas, and I was very much against terrorism, and my own personal beliefs about it. And I said in the email, I said, hey, we have to, if words mean things, words are important. We have to define the terms of terrorism. Well, what is a terrorist? Who is a terrorist? What is terrorist activity? And so if you ask one person who a terrorist is, they might have a different answer for you. So let's take the perfect example of ISIS, right? ISIS, everybody knows ISIS are terrorists. And they're, human trafficking, genocide, the whole 9 yards. So everybody on the planet can agree that ISIS are terrorists. I go, now, the sworn enemies of ISIS are YPG, the Kurds. And they've been fighting, against ISIS very bravely for a while. And they are funded large in part by the United States government. And we consider them our allies. So, but if you go and you ask Turkey, who is a NATO ally, who the YPG are, they're going to say that the YPG are terrorists. So who are terrorists? Are the terrorists ISIS? Are the terrorists the YPG? Or are both of them terrorists? Who's the terrorist? And, so what do we do about that? Well, if we look at, the 20th century, 200 million people were exterminated by government, right? Through Nazism, communism, socialism, Marxism, democide, death by government. That's been the biggest killer of people. Now, I would argue that arguing a ideology based on facts and its merits, that will go pretty far in stopping a Nazi regime from gaining power or a communist regime from gaining power. Because imagine if, there was a public forum where everybody could sit there and debate the merits of Nazism or communism from the beginning. Would Hitler have gotten into power? Would Mussolini have gotten into power? Would Mao, Pol Pot? I go, I believe that the forum of open ideas, that's the place that's where we can stop this. So that's why I created the platform that I created. And I think it's important to be able to do that.
Chris, there's a lot more I want to dive. I want to ask one more question, and I want to close this break only because I have to be somewhere. Like we're not usually time constrained, but I have to be somewhere. But I've noticed on Truth Social, so many things getting labeled fake news, and I thought that was a platform that was more trustable and free from censorship.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
About that. Whose machines are those? Is that source code sitting on? Sitting on Rumble, right?
Mm.
Who's one of the early investors in Rumble? A guy by the name of Peter Thiel.
Mm.
Same guy, early investor in Facebook.
Mm. It's interesting when you chase, because I don't know those names, but it's interesting because like I was hearing one of Tucker Carlson. I never was a huge Tucker Carlson fan until he gets fired, and I watched, and then I was like, I hadn't seen Megyn Kelly since the old days, but I'd seen a Glenn Beck, and he had O'Reilly and Megyn, and they rattled off a list of like 6 or 8 names that own almost every media outlet. And I was like, there was like 1 or 2 of those that I had ever heard before, and it just rolled off their tongue. And I was like, everything has to be approved by these handful of people. And that's what happened to truth and media is, and they're have very biased leanings and they control the flow of information, including Fox News, including like,
core
the
internet,
online stuff.
It's core internet. It is literally core internet technology. So what I've subsequently found out is that the reason, so we go through that whole big thing with that company, right? And my buddy reaches out to me and he's like, hey, I got a weird call and, blah, 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 blah. And they said that there's no way that this deal's going to go, but it's not about politics at all. And so I'm laughing. And ultimately, what it boils down to is it's the Center for Internet Security, which is the blacklist that censors everybody on the COVID messaging, censored everybody on the election integrity messaging, and they are entirely funded by Pierre Omidyar. And I don't know if you know who Pierre Omidyar is, but eBay. He's the founder of eBay. And he's right up there with the George Soros of the world. And they invest in tandem together. And, at the end of the day, it's globalist, horrific stuff. And, so people ask me, well, what can we do? And, the highest court is actually the court of public opinion. Okay. It's not the Supreme Court.
Can I suggest one that's higher?
God.
Room of heaven.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, power, spiritual forces of wickedness, and the weapons of our warfare are mighty through God.
Yes.
To the pulling down of strongholds, but public opinion is huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more of us than there are of them.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more believers than people understand or realize.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really good prayer warriors out there, a lot of good intercessors. And, we know how this ends.
What's interesting to me is some of the more outspoken online voices that used to, they weren't believers. They were anti all the conspiracy theories, all this stuff, are now becoming Christians.
Yeah. Saying
it was Christians that sounded the most intelligent and brought the most profound truth, and then they began to research on their own. And numerous ones. One guy was nicknamed the Podfather. I can't think of his name off the top of my list. And then Sean Ryan was talking about his conversion. Different ones who, and I'm like, there's a movement where all of the deception is being exposed. And that's my biggest prayer. God, would you just expose the darkness? Would you expose the people in Tampa Bay that are human traffickers, that have organizations and lead groups that supposedly fight human trafficking? God, would you expose that? Would you bring that down? Would you bring it to light? And
gotta follow the money, because that's what this is all about. It's about money and it's about power.
Yeah,
and
some of it's right in our face.
Oh yeah,
there's a website in Tampa of an organization that fights human trafficking that has satanic symbols all over their website. Another one has a quote on their front page from a satanic organization. And it has a Bible verse in it. So if you don't know what you're looking at, you're going to think and I'm like, no, it is in your face. Like, you can't be a part of that world and not know that this is a human trafficking satanic occult group. So, wow. Thank you so much. I don't even have your phone number yet. They may have been texting it to me because we were like, how do we get in touch with him? How do we send this to him? But I'd love to talk more.
Yeah, sure.
And maybe
Absolutely.
even have you on the show again. I'd love to hear more about your faith, and that part of your journey. So
It's a very interesting story, and I think it'll fit in pretty. Yeah, I'm a recovering Catholic, and a childhood survivor of sexual abuse by
wow.
So
man, that is like a lot of what we deal with. We've had people on here that grew up in satanic homes that were trained assassins on our show that today are walking in freedom and everything like that. But how people find us until we started doing stuff like this, it's been pretty hidden.
Yeah.
But the people that find us are, like, yeah, there's so much. I look forward to having you back on and getting that story. That really, I wish we had done that one first. If you're open to sharing, because I know.
No, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. It's my testimony,
Yeah. Praise God.
And so, yeah, I mean, everything that I do, it's all God, and it's spirit driven, and that's
the
why I don't
Spirit
get
leads
tired.
us into truth, even these kind of truths. Like I don't sit on like trying to find stuff. That's not me. The Holy Spirit will tell me, look up this. Like one day it was like, here we are fighting human trafficking, and the Lord says, you need to find out what's going on in Tampa Bay in regards to the organ. And I'm like, duh. Okay, God, of course. I mean, like, I got to find out who's in this game with us. And I think it's already being taken care of. And why is God calling us to do this? And within 30 minutes, I was sick to my stomach for days. What I uncovered, I walked out, I pulled our staff together, and I said, guys, let me show you what I've uncovered. Right here in the upper echelon of those who supposedly fight human trafficking in Tampa Bay are people that have satanic stuff all over their website. And one organization had $37 million set aside. It's gone. And they never had it. For 2 years, they told me they had money like that they were fighting human trafficking. They had raised all this money. They never had it. I dreamt those conversations up because I began to call it on the table. We'd be at meetings and I was like, they have this money. Here's the need. And there was no beds in Tampa Bay, hardly. And it was just like, now that I just misunderstood what was being said. I'm like going, no.
Well, it's controlled opposition, right?
Yep. So, Father God, I thank you for Chris. And, Lord, I pray, Lord, that, God, the stuff that's being exposed would be exposed at a greater level, Lord, that the house of cards built by the kingdom of darkness would fall. Lord, it looks impenetrable at times. They have built their fortresses, but, Father God, your kingdom is greater. And I pray, Father, in Jesus' name, for Chris, favor, supernatural protection. I know the type of opposition that comes against us spiritually and even in the physical realm and so Lord, I pray over him, his household, that you would supernaturally protect them, and Lord, I pray that the message would go far and wide for your kingdom and your glory. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank
Hallelujah.
you, Chris. And yeah, we will definitely have you back on again. And
anytime.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
I got to figure out how to close this.